Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It is another preview and prediction video, and we have an absolute blockbuster to get into. It's Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner, and they're going to be going at it in the final of the ATP Beijing tournament in China. So it's an ATP 500, and these are the two biggest stars in tennis right now. You could argue Djokovic, but let's just say for this year anyway, because they split the two Grand Slams, and Carlos Alcaraz is the only player, if I'm not mistaken, I could be, to beat Jannik Sinner twice this year, which is a pretty impressive feat because he's not lost many matches. Jannik Sinner, he's only lost 6 times this year, and 2 of those came against Alcaraz. They've only played each other twice this year, and both those times Alcaraz has won. So, despite having a phenomenal year, Sinner, Alcaraz has managed to get the better in the 2 meetups that they've had. It's 5-4 in favor of the Spaniard in the head-to-head, and we're going to break it down. So first of all, we're going to talk about some nuggets of information that you can see on screen, coaches, win predictor in terms of what Match Pro Graphics have said, and we've teamed up with them yet again. Then we're going to talk about their form. So not go through every single tournament this year, but just give a couple of interesting tidbits into how both players have looked this year and how they've been playing also this week, who they played this week, and how they looked. And then on top of that, we will talk about strategically and tactically how the match is potentially going to play out, and I'll ultimately give you guys my prediction. So, as you can see, Jannik Sinner is the number 1 in the world right now. Carlos Alcaraz at number 3, and they are tennis now, as you can see on screen, or if you're listening on a podcast platform, don't worry, I've got you covered. The win predictor is saying 60% in favor of Jannik Sinner, which is interesting. I have to say, I'm a little bit surprised by that. If I'm being completely frank, I would say it's a real 50-50, to be honest. If we look at Alcaraz's form for the year so far, he's had a very solid year, of course, a very good year. 83% win rate for the year, 83% on hard courts are matching that. Against top 10 players, he's played 12 matches, 8 wins and 4 losses, and those wins against top 10 players coming against some phenomenal players, of course. Djokovic, Medvedev 3 times, Zverev twice, Sinner twice. I mean, what more is there to say? I mean, it's just been incredible. These are like very, very good top 10 players. We're talking about top 5, really, rather than top 10. And then if we talk about tournament wins, 1 Indian Wells, 1 Roland Garros, 1 Wimbledon, lost in the Olympics final, and now looking to win another title in Beijing. So it's been a very fruitful year. Interestingly, hasn't won any 500s or 250s this year. So this could be his first 500 of the year, but he's won some big titles, of course, and he's very, very good for large parts of the year. For Jannik Sinner, it's been a phenomenal year, and you could argue one of the all-time great years in tennis. 91% win rate, which is phenomenal. On hard court, he's only lost twice. He's at a 95% win rate on hard courts. And against top 10 players, 4 losses at a 73% win rate. That's out of 15 matches, so 11 wins. And those losses came against Rublev, Medvedev, Alcaraz twice, and Tsitsipas. But he has won tournaments in Australia, Rotterdam, Miami, Halle, Cincinnati, US Open, and looking to do the same in Beijing. And what's even more impressive, I think, is the fact that he has made at least the quarterfinal in every single tournament that he's played in this year. So he's either made the quarterfinals, semifinals, or he's gone on to win, which is, yeah, I mean, pretty incredible. No final losses this year, by the way, as well, which I think is even more impressive. But as I said, there is definitely a interesting. There's definitely an interesting story being developed, I think, with these two guys because the rivalry is incredible. But you know, Alcaraz has really stopped Sinner from winning a couple of more titles. I mean, he would have been, I think, the favorite in the Roland Garros final against Zverev, and I also think at Indian Wells as well, he would have been the favorite there as well. So look, he could have added a couple more titles to his repertoire. but Alcaraz has stopped him in his tracks, and he'll be looking to get revenge and looking to get one up on Alcaraz, level the head to head, because he's really been his biggest thorn this year, and they're good friends, and we know that. But of course, when they go onto court, they become great rivals. In terms of who they played this week, sorry, even Carlos Alcaraz looks very good. I have to be honest. He hasn't dropped a single set, beating Giovanni and Pesci Pericard, Griekspoor, Khachanov, and Medvedev. For Jannik Sinner, it's been an interesting, couple of matches, especially at the start, because Jarry and Safiullin, he dropped sets against both of those players, but then went on to win in 3 sets. Lehechka and Bu both won in straight sets. Bu, of course, playing some fantastic tennis with the home crowd behind him. And then we are going to get these guys playing in what is hopefully going to be another blockbuster affair. And both guys extremely athletic, extremely powerful, and both have, both have phenomenally dynamic games. In terms of tactically, then, I mean, I would hope you guys have seen these two play enough and probably watched their matches before, but I want to talk about it from maybe a more specific standpoint rather than just talking about some of the patterns of play we might see. And we know that the ad court battle is always important when it comes to the elite players, especially Alcaraz and Sinner, and we've seen in the past Sinner dominate that ad court, especially in the backhand to backhand exchanges, although Alcaraz has managed to stop that from happening as the rivalry's gone on. He's managed to actually at least match Sinner in those exchanges or actually get the better of him. And then, in the forehand wing as well, both players incredibly strong. They've just not got many weaknesses. Both players very strong forehand, backhand. Returning, I think both players are phenomenal as well. At the net, I mean, Alcaraz has got arguably the better touch game. Very good drop shot, lob. Just hands are just, I mean, they're sublime. But Sinner actually has improved on that aspect of his game a lot. He's added those types of, I'd say, when you work for a company, they talk about, hard skills and soft skills. And it's in tennis, it's a soft skill, right? It's something to complement the rest of your game. That drop shot, the lob, the softer hands, the little slices at times as well, and the little short slices and things like that. Just the smaller intricacies that you can add to your game and give your opponent some more things to think about. That variety is really important, especially as you get better and people start to figure out the way that you play. And Sinner's beaten so many players, they're all going to be looking at him, studying him, thinking, how can we beat him? So it's important he continues to improve. And I think the most important thing for me for both players is actually the serve. And, Sinner, we saw, made incredible gains on his serve at the back end or mid last year. And then it's really paid dividends, completely changed his action, went from platform to pinpoint. And it seems to be, not just that, there's also been some other biomechanical changes, but it's clearly been a big, I think it's been a big improvement on his game overall. And we were talking to other players at Wimbledon, and one of the players that I talked to, and actually it wasn't just Tommy Paul, it was Medvedev as well. I talked to both of these guys, and they both said the same thing to me. Tommy Paul said when he lost to Alcaraz that the first serve is the most important thing in men's tennis. And for Medvedev, when he was asked about how Sinner's improved his game, he said, well, he's always been an incredibly clean ball striker. He said one of the factors or one of the things in his game that has changed is the fact that he doesn't miss as much. So his accuracy, his shot placement, and arguably his shot selection has improved for Jannik. But he said that his biggest change in his game, and it's a very positive change, is his serve. He said he serves bigger and he hits his spots better. And that's just so big for someone like Sinner to be able to start adding 3 points to his repertoire, right? Being able to pick up those 3 points when he really needs them in the crunch moments. He's got, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's got the best break points saved percentage on tour. And that would be, yes, of course, because of his incredible hitting ability from the back of the court, but two, probably because he's been hitting some unreturnable and aces on a lot of those points as well because he's can't clutch when needed. For Alcaraz, the serve I think there's still a lot of room for improvement. I have to be honest, but in Beijing, it's been really positive. He's been serving big, hitting his spots, and we saw, and actually it's interesting because Djokovic, when I talked to him after his loss to Alcaraz in the final, and he said to me when I asked him, "What do you think you'd have done better?" And he said, "Look, I've never seen Alcaraz serve like this, serving 130 plus into corners, serving that big. He just served really well." And I agreed with Novak that he did serve really well in the final, but at the same time, we've seen that from Alcaraz in the past. I think the issue for Alcaraz has been the consistency, being able to land that first serve consistently, even, and also hit his spots. And we know he can serve 130 plus, but he also has a variation of the kick serve, the slice serve, etc. And there has been some changes, I think, technically and biomechanically to his serve. I've seen it on social media on other coaches talking about it, and you can see there are some noticeable changes. It hasn't been completely remodeled, but there's definitely been some tweaks, and clearly that's also helped him. But I do think actually that the serve is going to be really crucial in this matchup, and it hasn't always been in the past. But I think actually on these courts they're quite quick. They're quite quick, and we saw when Alcaraz played Medvedev in the semifinals that both these guys, they had some really easy holds, and then actually the reason why they both started getting broken quite a lot is because not necessarily because they weren't serving big and the courts were slow. It was more because they were managing to read each other really well, and that might happen. Of course, there may be some issues, no doubt, with there definitely may be some issues with both players being able to anticipate where the other is going to serve, and I'm sure we'll see some breaks of serve. But one thing I will say is I wouldn't be surprised if we see a tiebreaker because that seems to be a real staple in this rivalry, a tiebreaker in the majority of their matches. So, look, I mean, it's going to be an incredible match. I have to say, we're going to see I'm sure, some highlight reel worthy rallies as we always do between these two. Both players being dragged out wide, coming forward, transitioning to the net, little cat and mouse points, then lob, and then back to the baseline, and those incredibly athletic and edge of your seat type points. In terms of how this match can be won or lost, and I'm going to try and be brief with it because I feel like I could really go into detail with this matchup, but we are going to see it more times in the future, and I feel like this specific final is important, but it's not the type of match where there is so much on the line. For Alcaraz, I think his serve is going to be key, I think, as I mentioned, and obviously hitting his spots. And if he can get 3 points on his serve, fantastic. We know that Sinner, especially off the second serve, I think both players are going to be aggressive on that second serve return. And so Alcaraz needs to try and avoid hitting a lot of second serves. I think what's also going to be important is his first strike tennis because Sinner also plays. I would argue he's got very good first strike tennis as well, ability or first strike tennis ability, but I think Alcaraz's first strike tennis ability is bigger. It's definitely bigger, and he goes for more as well, I think, on that first strike. Sinner sometimes can be a little bit conservative. I'm not going to say that he's going to float the ball back, but he might go a little bit more central or deep down the middle and he'll hit it clean, right? We know he's arguably the cleanest ball striker on tour, but Alcaraz will go for a corner, right? He will go down the line early and he's not maybe afraid to do so. He's a bit more risky in that sense. And I think against Sin, you probably have to be, in some instances, take those calculated risks. And I'm sure Alcaraz will. I think he needs to do that because that will be important to get on the front foot against Sinner as much as possible, especially on his service games, so that he doesn't feel the pressure. And I also think in the ad court exchanges, we've seen that and it's evolved in their rivalry. Definitely, there was a period, as I said, noted before in this video, that Sinner would dominate that exchange, and at Wimbledon, for example, he was getting Alcaraz to slice a lot in that exchange, and he was getting picked off because he was being rushed constantly. His backhand defense has definitely been shored up more. I think he needs to be the one that goes line first. He did really well against Medvedev, and that to me was a really positive sign in that they were going backhand to backhand, and he would then mix it up a little bit at times with the slice cross court, which is fine, or even down the line. I think against Sinner, the slice down the line is not a good ploy because Sinner will pick it up on his forehand and whip it cross court, and he's going to get hurt. I think Alcaraz is doing that. I don't think that's something to do against Medvedev. It's different. His forehand is not as powerful. It's not as much of a weapon, but Sinner will whip that cross court and he'll really hurt you with it. I think if he slices down the line with the backhand. So if he's going to go line, he needs to go big down the line, right? Go flat down the line. And Alcaraz did that really well against Medvedev. So I think that's going to be a really important shot, I think, to get Sinner off balance. And he's got one of the best running forehands in the game. But the way that Alcaraz is hitting that backhand, I don't think Sinner's going to be able to hit a whole lot of winners off that. He might be able to get it back into play with, like a more lob, loopy, high topspin forehand back into that ad corner. But that's where Alcaraz might then open up with the entire into and forehand and then hurt Sinner. So that's going to be important. I think utilizing the drop shot, we know how important that is for Alcaraz. He loves to use it. I think that's going to be a key thing as well, being able to be being able to identify the right moments to play it, because we know how athletic Sinner is. But shot selection is going to be key, I think, for Alcaraz more than anything, because I think Sinner is able to be slightly more consistent from the baseline, I would argue, than Alcaraz. But Alcaraz has more variety and he has the ability to play so many different ways, whereas Sinner doesn't quite have as much variety. So I think for Alcaraz, it's about knowing when to play certain shots and not overplaying at times, but also not underplaying. And there's going to be a balance to be struck there, which is going to be interesting to see. And it always is intriguing to see when he comes up against someone like Sinner. For Jannik Sinner, for me, it's always about doing the basics right first. And for me, it's serve, return. Is he being super solid with his depth and moving his opponent around? Is he hitting the ball cleanly? Yes, for the most part, he always is, because he's, as I said, one of the cleanest ball strikers on tour. Is he moving well? And he's one of the best movers on tour, so as long as he's fit and healthy, fantastic. And I think for Sinner, it's going to be important that I think he needs to be the one that actually stays a bit more patient in the rallies, but he needs to try and get on the front foot as well when he can with his power. I think he's going to have to take a little bit more risk at times when he does get the opportunity to step in a little bit or take the ball slightly earlier. I think he needs to. Being a bit more cautious and consistent is fine when you're on the back foot. But if the rally's at neutral, he needs to try and be the one to make the first move and get the point on his terms, because I do feel that this matchup always looks better for whoever's on the front foot. I don't remember someone winning this matchup being on the back foot for the majority of the match. And I could be wrong. So let me know in the comments if I'm wrong, because I could be. But it's normally the person that's on the front foot being the proactive one and coming forward. And I think, coming to the net is going to be interesting, because with Alcaraz, he's going to do that at times and he might get picked off. With Sinner, I think at times, he needs to be brave and do that as well, because yes, Medvedev did that today and he got picked off, but Sinner's got better approach shots. He's got better hands, I would argue, at the net as well. And at times, it's not a bad ploy to disrupt the rhythm of Alcaraz, because if you don't disrupt his rhythm, you're in trouble, because he will just systematically destroy you, because naturally Alcaraz plays in a way that disrupts his opponent's rhythm. He's got all the different types of variation to utilize. Sinner doesn't necessarily play like that. He's more like a Djokovic. And if you listen to people talk about Djokovic, he's the greatest player ever to hold a racket. But when they talk about hitting with him or even playing with him, they say that he hits a nice ball. And what that means is what they're trying to say is that actually he does have a lot of variation in his game, especially nowadays. But at times he hits almost at a nice rally ball, right? His rally ball's like a nice pace, and it's not nasty to return back into play and play off, and that's fine. But what Djokovic is really good at doing is being consistent and killing with depth. And Sinner has that similar ability, but he also does have that knack of also hitting at maybe one pace and one spin at times, and he needs to vary it up, I think, a little bit. And he won't necessarily use the backhand slice, and then that means, okay, Can I hit maybe different angles, shorter angles, make Carlos feel uncomfortable that way, come forward to the net, and also be proactive on my return games and make sure that Alcaraz is feeling the heat on his serve, because that's going to be important, I think, for me, for Sinner, because I think Sinner will hit his spots and get some free points. I'd argue that Sinner's first serve is probably better than Carlos's, but I'd say Sinner's second serve is probably weaker. So I think Carlos will really try and pick on that as much as possible. It could just come down to who hits the high percentage of first serves, honestly, because these guys are going to be so evenly matched if they're both playing near their best. So may the best man win. I'm going to go for... You know what? I'm going to go for Alcaraz to win again. I'm going to go for him to do the three-peat against Sinner. I'm going to go for him to win in 3 sets. I would not be surprised if Sinner wins. I mean, it's a real 50-50. I think it's a real toss-up, despite the fact that Alcaraz has won both matches this year. This matchup, I think, will always be a 50-50 unless it goes, unless Carlos wins the next 5 matches and he goes 10-4 up in the head-to-head. If there's, maybe a gap of 2 in the head-to-head, I think it's fair to say it's a 50-50. I mean, because I just think it's that type of matchup. They always have close matches. They match up stylistically really well. And, I don't think anyone has a huge advantage in the matchup at all. So, yeah, I'm going to go for that. Let me know in the comment section below who you're picking and why. And I'm really looking forward to it. We will be doing a live stream watch along for it. So do tune in. Anthony will be doing it. So make sure you click your notification bell, and I will probably upload the stream as well before it starts. You can get your notification bell on that as well to get notified. Thanks very much, guys. Stay safe and well. We'll see you in the next video.